said across the board, because a lot of it was pure projection. I mean, I'm hearing him talk about monsters in charge of governments, the face of terror, nuclear weapons. Who are we talking about here, Iran or Israel? Because I would ask a few questions for your viewers to consider today as they listen to Doron. Which country in the Middle East has nuclear weapons? It's not Iran, it's Israel. Which country in the Middle East has not signed the NPT, the non-proliferation treaty? It's not Iran, it's Israel. Which country in the Middle East is
Let me tell you something. If you have been following this conflict and you think you understand the nuclear argument being used to justify this war, this debate is going to make you sit up straight, because Mehdi Hasan does something in this 20 minutes that almost nobody in mainstream media has been willing to do. He takes every single premise Doron Spielman puts on the table, flips it over, and shows you what is written on the bottom. And what is written on the bottom does not look anything like what you were told. This is Piers Morgan Uncensored. Doron Spielman, IDF Reserve spokesman, on one side. Mehdi Hasan, founder of ZTO News, on the other. The center of this debate is the question that this entire war was supposedly fought over. Nuclear weapons in the Middle East? Who has them? Who does not? Who is being held accountable? And who's being given a pass that no other country on the planet would ever receive? Spielman comes in with the 1936 Nazi Germany comparison, the face of terror framing, and the liberal fantasy land dismissal ready to go. Hasan comes in with UN Security Council resolution numbers, IAEA reports, US intelligence assessments, and a list of 6 countries that were bombed in a single calendar year. One of those approaches is rhetoric. The other one is a receipts folder, and you're about to watch what happens when those two things meet. Subscribe right now, because this one is going to go places most channels will not follow. Let us get into it.
Said across the board, because a lot of it was pure projection. I mean, I'm hearing him talk about monsters in charge of governments, the face of terror, nuclear weapons. Who are we talking about here, Iran or Israel? Because I would ask a few questions for your viewers to consider today as they listen to Doron. Which country in the Middle East has nuclear weapons? It's not Iran, it's Israel. Which country in the Middle East has not signed the NPT, the non-proliferation treaty? It's not Iran, it's Israel. Which country in the Middle East is defying a UN Security Council resolution calling for that country to open up its nuclear facilities to IAEA inspectors? It's not Iran, it's Israel. Which country in the Middle East attacked 6 countries in the Middle East last year? 6. It wasn't Iran, it was Israel. So Iran, for all its many sins and crimes, is not the rogue nuclear state in the Middle East right now. That country is Israel. As you said, Piers, in your introduction, global public opinion has made it very clear that they see Israel as the threat to regional and international peace right now. You pointed out, Piers, that it's Benjamin Netanyahu dragging American Republican presidents into wars of choice, Iraq in 2002-3, and now Iran in 2025, 2026.
Yeah, I mean, Doron Spielman, the flaw in your argument is just a bunch of woolly liberals who didn't want this to happen. If you look at actually the reaction from American conservatives, you know, you got Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, Alex Jones. You've got Trump supporters like Joe Rogan, Theo Von, and others, the big podcasters who helped get him elected. There's a massive cross-section of very influential people, many of whom are conservative Trump supporters historically, who have condemned this war and want nothing to do with it. So I don't think you can just bat it away as, oh, it's just a bunch of, you know, liberals throwing their toys out of the pram. It's not.
You know, I love the word projection because projection is used by people who don't live in the real world, because the alternative to a projection when it comes to a nuclear weapon, when does that projection end, Mehdi? Does it end when Iran is trying to develop enriched uranium, and already back before the JCPOA had already developed 6 times, and now they've developed almost 90% of enriched uranium, which is 20 times the amount you need for an atomic weapon? Is that for civil uses? Is that still a projection, or is it when they actually press that little button and it lands in the U.S.?
Well, let me ask you. Well, let me before.
Hold on, Piers.
Well, hang on. On that point, Doron, on that point, given you said a
projection that 22 civilians have been killed
but let
from
me ask
ballistic missiles, and we've got 600 warheads on Israel. We've had warheads land on the UAE.
You've killed 2,000 people in Lebanon and 3,000 people in Iran.
And regarding, you know, this is so funny. Regarding Iran, you know, you put them on the court bench. You call in someone for a character reference, comparing Iran to Israel. Who's Iran? Well, they've developed a global terror regime that stretches from the Middle East through Latin America into Europe. They have the Houthis who've stopped shipping and have fired missiles and weapons both at Israel and U.S. assets. They created Hezbollah, the world's largest terror organization. That is also one of the largest drug organizations.
Actually, you created Hezbollah by illegally invading Lebanon.
Who committed October 7th. They just killed 30,000 of their people in the streets for protesting. I mean, do we need such a projection? I mean, only an idiot would actually say we need a projection to understand what Iran's intent is. We don't even need to try. They keep shoving it in your face, Mehdi. You're an
So even if I were to accept your premise that Iran's nuclear program was a threat, even though the IEA and US intelligence say it wasn't, but let's accept your premise that it was a threat. This is not the way you stop a nuclear program. We had the JCPOA, which Israel opposed, Donald Trump opposed. Iran was enriching at 3.67%, had no pathway to a bomb under the JCPOA, as every major disarmament and nuclear expert said at the time. It was Israel, Netanyahu, Trump that opposed this, and now we have them at 60% enriched uranium because of the actions of Israel and Donald Trump. So if you claim to want to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon, you've done a very bad job of doing that. In fact, if you're the Iranian leadership now, you probably want a bomb more now than ever before because you've been attacked by Israel 2 years running. That's one point. On the point about projection, the point I'm making is this, Doron, and you dodged it, so let me ask it again. The only country in the Middle East right now that can put its finger on a button and fire a nuke is Israel. The only country threatening to fire the nuke it has, Ben-Gvir smiled and nodded the other day when an Israeli journalist suggested nuking Iran, is Israel. Why is your country, Doron, you're a spokesman for the military, in violation of UN Resolution 487, which was unanimously passed, including by the Reagan administration in 1981, calling for Israel to open up its nuclear facilities to the IAEA? Why wouldn't you allow IAEA inspectors to look at your illicit secret nuclear weapons program?
First of all, I think you and I both know that there are no binding United Nations resolutions against Israel. Not in
yes,
any
there is.
sphere.
UN Security Council Resolution 487.
No, there's not a
You're wrong, Doron. You're wrong, Doron.
UN resolution.
You're wrong.
And there is a number of.
You're lying. Everyone can Google it right now. UN Security Council Resolution
against Iran's
487. People can Google it.
Mehdi, you just said it yourself.
You can talk over me.
Basically, just
UN Security Council Resolution.
You're saying that Israel.
487.
Mehdi, one second. We can't.
You can talk over me. I'll wait and make my point again. Okay, well, let me just make one point and then I'll let you speak indefinitely. UN Resolution 487. You can Google it right now. People can watch it at home. In 1981, the Reagan administration voted for it. It calls on Israel to urgently open up its facilities to IAEA controls. That is a UN Security Council resolution which is binding under international law. Israel has been in violation of it for 45 years. Why are you in violation of it? And do you accept that Israel has nuclear weapons? If you won't accept that, why should we take anything you say seriously on anything else?
It is not a binding resolution. However, I want to hit your point because I think you just answered it for me. You said that this has been Israel, according to you, has been in violation for 40 years. So therefore, you're assuming Israel's had a nuclear weapon for 40 years. Can you tell me one time, Mehdi?
It has.
One single time.
Are you
where
denying
Israel
that?
has threatened another country with
Doron,
nuclear weapons? Can you tell me, Mehdi, one time when an Israeli prime minister under an entire command center would have the ability with massive controls, just one second.
I answered your question.
That is referred to another country. Hold on, Mehdi. Another country, as you and I both know, that Iran, who you have projections about, the supreme leader, right, Ali Khamenei, which I'm very curious why you defend him and his entire regime. Ali Khamenei refers to Israel as the little Satan. And we both know how he refers to the United States, meaning the spiritual leader. You've called him a spiritual leader.
But Doron, you're not. Let me jump in here. Doron, let me jump in. Let me jump in, please.
Calls America the great Satan.
Let me jump in,
and you want to give him a nuclear weapon?
Stop
Israel
talking.
and the U.S. are fighting together against
please
terror
stop
regimes.
talking. I am here. I am here. And I am moderating this panel, much as you both like to just get off without me. Mehdi raises the point I have raised with a number of pro-Israeli guests in the last few weeks. Why is it that Israel does not admit it has nuclear weapons? And are you prepared to do so now?
Israel, as we all know, is a state that upon its very founding faced an existential threat from 7 countries that attacked it. We also know that in 1967, Israel was attacked by 3 countries, followed by 1973, followed by the Gulf War in 1981, followed by Hezbollah and Hamas. There's probably not been another country on Earth.
What's this got to do with you being transparent about having nuclear weapons?
According to the non-proliferation treaty, which Israel has not signed and therefore is not bound by, Israel, if it maintains a nuclear arsenal, it has not used it, and if it maintains it, it is because it
Why
faces
are you saying if? You know the answer.
Hold on. And since the Holocaust, which today is International Holocaust Day in Israel, it's Israeli Holocaust Day, and we are mourning tonight 6 million Jews that have died. Israel maintains the ability never to rely on anyone else, and therefore, Israel is not bound by the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty. It didn't sign on. Who is bound? The United States is bound, and it has followed it.
Yeah, but how can you demand?
Iran,
how can you demand?
Pierce, Iran, I answered
Doron,
you.
you're not answering my question.
Because of an existential threat. But I just want to say Iran has signed it and violated it from 2002.
How can you, with a straight face, defend Israel's determination for full transparency by another country over its nuclear weapon ambitions when you have so far steadfastly ducked my very simple question as to whether Israel has its own nuclear weapons? And
I have not ducked your question.
Do you have them or not?
Pierce, and I explained to you that while I do not have first-hand knowledge of Israel's nuclear facilities, like you, I've heard the foreign reports.
You don't know. You don't know.
Hold on. I'm answering.
As
Pierce,
a reservist IDF spokesman, you don't know if Israel has nukes.
I would assume it is highly likely, as do you, that Israel has a nuclear program. Israel never signed the NPT, and the reason Israel never signed the NPT, I would assume, even though I wasn't in the room, is because Israel maintains its individual right to defend itself. To compare that now to Iran and a potential nuclear program in a regime that is the world's #1 global terrorism, or they are not just terrorism, they engineered the idea of terrorism. They represent terror that has killed 241 American Marines. They have killed 85 Jews in Buenos Aires. They have killed thousands of U.S. soldiers with roadside bombs. They have carried out 22, according to MI5, mass casualty attempts in England since 2022. They just killed 40,000 of the protesters. Israel has a protest about cottage cheese. Israel's protests every day. How can you compare the idea that Israel would have a nuclear weapon and Iran, the potential of Hitler having a nuclear weapon?
Let Mehdi respond.
I noticed that Doron said that Iran killed 30,000 of its people a few minutes ago.
Remains in Iran. This war's a failure, and I don't see how
I
you
said
get
it isn't a failure because you'll set back a terror regime that operates with ballistic missiles, operates as
the regime remains in place.
Hamas, you'll have taken, again...
The Supreme Leader's son is the new Ayatollah, right?
Pierce.
Yeah?
Say this again, I'm sorry?
The Ayatollah, the Supreme Leader who was killed, his son is his replacement. The IRGC regime remains in place. There's been no protests from the people of Iran, and the Straits of Hormuz have become a massive weapon for the Iranians to use economically, as they also simultaneously attack all their Gulf state neighbors. So the idea that my point is the idea that at the end of this, Iran keeps its enriched uranium, you would have to admit, in that eventuality, the war's a failure.
Because a war, Pierce, it's very rare that you get a victory, what's called, unconditional surrender of any enemy. I don't think it's happened since World War II. What you get in wars are cumulative gains. Again, this is not fast food. It's like a McDonald's drive-through. The woman says, "What do you want?" You say, "I want, the Iranian regime." This is a process that began a number of months ago with the 12-day war. And what Israeli intelligence and U.S. intelligence saw is as soon as that war ended, Iran went right back to building a nuclear program, developing the nuclear sites, digging for the uranium that was there. They refurbished their ballistic missile sites and were expanding it from 2,500 to 7,000. And like you said, that now that we see Ali Khamenei has been killed, what do we see happen? They have not reformed. They put in another member of the exact same family, meaning this regime is evil and has to
you have done this.
Now.
Hold on, can I actually say
Mehdi respond
to stop them, Pierce? It's the idea of good standing against
Mehdi's
evil.
response, please.
So what both of you are missing, to an extent, is it's not really about what uranium is left in the country. It's about intent. You have left, the Israelis and the American government have left the Iranian government, not just in place. There hasn't been the regime change that Netanyahu lied to Trump and said would be easy in that situation from meeting. They've not just left the Iranian regime in place, but they've left the Iranian government with the clear intent to want to have to defend itself, to use Doron and the Israelis' favorite phrase, their right to self-defense. If you were in the Iranian government today, would you not want to get nuclear weapons? Would you not think I'd been attacked 2 years running by people I was in the middle of negotiations with? Every time I'm in a negotiation with them, they kill our negotiators, they kill our top foreign diplomats, they threaten to kill more of us. Every time we're doing a deal, whether it's in Geneva or Vienna or Oman, they attack us, which is what the Israelis did last year. Why would you not want to get nuclear weapons? Why would you not look at North Korea and say, no one dares touch North Korea because they have nukes? Why would you not listen to Doron speaking on Piers Morgan saying, well, we didn't sign the NPT, so we don't have any obligations not to have nukes? Why wouldn't Iran say, well, we're going to pull out of the NPT, we're going to do what North Korea did, and we're going to do it because the world saw us get illegally attacked 2 years running? Doron asked me, do I want Iran to have nuclear weapons? No, I'm anti-nuclear weapons. I'm not like you. I don't support nukes and have a secret nuclear weapons program. I supported the JCPOA, which in the very first paragraph, Iran affirmed never to build nuclear weapons, which said that Iran could only enrich to 3.67%, which got rid of a lot of their highly enriched uranium. You, the Israeli government, Netanyahu, stopped the JCPOA, wrecked the JCPOA. You helped Iran enrich to 20 and then 60. You brought us to this situation, the Israeli government and the Donald Trump administration. So don't lecture the rest of us about nukes when you have nukes and you've now incentivized Iran to get nukes. Every year...
Let us start with the most important question in this entire debate, because it is the one that Doron Spielman spends 20 minutes trying not to answer, and the one that Piers Morgan keeps bringing him back to. Does Israel have nuclear weapons? Spielman is an IDF reserve spokesman. A military official sitting on a major international television program to argue that Iran must be stopped from acquiring nuclear weapons, because nuclear weapons in the hands of a dangerous regime in the Middle East are an existential threat to civilization, and he cannot say yes or no to whether his own country has them. He eventually lands on highly likely as his answer. Highly likely. From the military spokesman of the country in question, about weapons that the entire international community knows exist, that the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists estimates at between 90 and 400 warheads, and that Israel has maintained under a policy of deliberate ambiguity for decades. Hasan's point is not subtle, and it does not need to be. You cannot build a coherent argument for why Iran must be prevented from acquiring nuclear weapons by any means necessary, including a war that has killed thousands of people and closed the Strait of Hormuz, while simultaneously refusing to acknowledge that your own country has had nuclear weapons for half a century, has never signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and is in violation of UN security. Council Resolution 480 and 87, which was passed unanimously in 1981 with the Reagan administration's vote and calls on Israel to open its nuclear facilities to IAEA inspection. That resolution exists. People can Google it right now. Israel has been in violation of it for 45 years. And Spielman's response is that it is not binding. Hasan's counter to that is devastating and correct. If Israel's position is that because it never signed the NPT, it does not have to follow international nuclear law, then why does not Iran simply pull out of the NPT and apply the same logic? Why does not every country that feels threatened simply decide international agreements do not apply to them? The answer, of course, is that the rules only apply consistently when the enforcement is consistent. And the enforcement has never been consistent. One country in the Middle East has undeclared nuclear weapons, refuses inspection, is in violation of a binding UN resolution and faces no consequences. Another country is enriching uranium to 60% and the response is a war. That double standard is not a liberal talking point. It is the documented factual record and it has a direct line to the crisis everyone is now living inside. The JCPOA argument is where Hasan lands his most structurally important point, and it needs to be understood clearly because it is the argument that collapses the entire justification for this war. Under the JCPOA, Iran was enriching uranium to 3.67%. Every major nuclear and disarmament expert said at the time that there was no pathway to a bomb under those conditions. The IAEA was verifying compliance. The deal was working in the specific functional sense of keeping Iran away from weapons-grade material. Netanyahu opposed it. Trump opposed it. The deal was destroyed. And then the enrichment climbed, past 20%, past 60%, toward the 90% threshold for weapons-grade material. Hasan says it plainly. If you claim to want to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon, you have done a very bad job of it. The actions of Netanyahu and Trump produced the exact outcome they claimed to be preventing. And now, as we heard in the LBC segment, Trump is desperately trying to negotiate a 20-year freeze, which is structurally similar to the deal he destroyed that was already delivering a 15-year freeze at a fraction of the cost in blood and dollars and global standing. The incentive point is the one that nobody in the pro-war camp wants to engage with honestly. Hasan makes it directly. If you're the Iranian leadership right now, having watched your supreme leader get killed, having watched your country get bombed by a foreign military operating in coordination with a neighbouring nuclear-armed state, you probably want a nuclear deterrent more now than at any point in the last 20 years. Not because you want to use it, but because the lesson of this conflict for every non-nuclear state watching is that nuclear weapons are the only thing that prevents the kind of military action Iran has just experienced. North Korea has nuclear weapons and nobody is bombing it. Libya gave up its nuclear program and Gaddafi ended up dead. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons as part of the Budapest Memorandum and Russia invaded. The strategic logic of nuclear deterrence does not require you to be an ideological extremist to understand. It just requires you to observe the pattern. The 1936 Nazi Germany comparison. Let us be honest about this because Spielman deploys it, and it is the argument that is supposed to end the conversation before it starts. The comparison only works if you accept that every adversary is Hitler and every military conflict is the last chance to stop the Holocaust. But the problem with universalizing that comparison is that it has been used to justify every American military intervention since World War II. Iraq was Hitler. Saddam was Hitler. Gaddafi was Hitler. The comparison is not an argument. It is a rhetorical device designed to make any question about proportionality or alternatives sound like appeasement. Hasan does not take the bait. He stays with the facts, and the facts are more damaging than any rhetorical counter could be. The 6 countries point is the one that Spielman never adequately answers, and that should be part of every conversation about who represents a destabilizing force in the Middle East. In the calendar year 2025, Israel bombed 6 countries. Hasan says he cannot think of a single country on earth aside from the United States and Israel that bombed half a dozen countries in a single year. That is not an exaggeration. That is a list. Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iran, Iraq, 6 countries. And the country doing the bombing is the one that gets described in Western media as defending itself, while every country being bombed gets described as an aggressor. The Operation Eternal Darkness moment is the one that should be impossible to explain away and somehow keeps getting explained away. Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire. The US and Pakistan were both clear it included the Israeli war against Hezbollah. And then Israel launched a bombing campaign under the codename Operation Eternal Darkness that killed hundreds of people and wounded thousands. Over 2,000 dead in Lebanon, according to the health ministry, during a ceasefire that Piers Morgan accurately names as the beginning of the question of whether Israel is not just the reason the war started, but the barrier to ending it. Spielman's response to all of this is to call it liberal fantasy land and to suggest that people who question these actions do not understand the real world. But Hasan identifies exactly who he is calling residents of liberal fantasy land. Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, the podcasters and conservative commentators who helped build the movement that elected Trump and who are now openly condemning this war. These are not Oxford corridor liberals throwing their toys out of the pram. These are the people whose support made this administration possible, and they are looking at what is being done in their name and saying this is not what we signed up for. The moment that crystallizes everything in this debate is when Hasan reads out the 2025 assessment from the Director of National Intelligence. We continue to assess Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and that Khamenei has not reauthorized a nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003, the US intelligence community's own assessment. The same intelligence community whose assessments are supposedly the foundation for the decisions this administration makes, said Iran was not building a nuclear weapon, and the war happened anyway. A country that the US government's own intelligence apparatus assessed as not building a nuclear weapon is being bombed, while a country that the same government knows has nuclear weapons and refuses IA inspection is being given weapons and diplomatic cover. That is not a liberal fantasy. That is the documented factual record. And until the people defending this war are willing to engage with that record, honestly, instead of retreating to Hitler comparisons and liberal fantasy dismissals, the rest of the world is going to keep drawing the conclusions that Spain and Turkey, and increasingly everyone outside of Washington and Tel Aviv, have already drawn. Piers Morgan ends the segment by noting that record numbers of people globally now view Israel and the United States unfavorably, that Spain is calling Netanyahu a war criminal, that Turkey compared him to Hitler. That damage is not reversible with a press conference or a rebranding exercise. It is the accumulated weight of documented actions meeting a global public that has access to more information than any previous generation and is capable of making its own judgments about what they are seeing. The facts are not on one side of this debate. The facts are in the record. And the record is available to anyone willing to look at it honestly. Stay informed. Stay critical. Keep asking the questions that the liberal fantasy dismissal is designed to prevent you from finishing. If this channel is doing that work, subscribe. Right now, share this video and keep showing up. I'm Lucas Stoey, and I will see you in the next one.